Welcome to Follow Me to the MROP, a podcast dedicated to the journey of the masculine soul and the transformative power of initiation. My name is Brian Mueller. I live in suburban Dayton, Ohio, and I made my rites at Pilgrim Park in Illinois in 2014. I'm your host, and in each episode of our show, I'll sit down with one man who has made his rites, and I'll invite him to tell his story. This won't be an abstract explanation or a theological lecture, just a real conversation about what it was like to cross that threshold at the rites and what changed afterward. Before we begin, a quick word of gratitude. This podcast is brought to you by Choosing Presence. We believe that the greatest gift a man can give his community is his own presence. In a world of constant distraction, Choosing Presence provides the tools to help you stay grounded in the now. If you'd like an easy way to begin learning about the practice of presence, you can download the free Practicing Presence app at choosingpresence.org/app. Now, the Men's Rites of Passage, or MROP, is an experience designed to help men move from the first half of life into the second, shifting from a focus on ego and achievement to a life of meaning and soul. On this show, we just don't talk about the rites in theory, we talk to the men who have walked the path. Today, we are joined by a man who has made his rites, and we're going to hear exactly what that journey looked like for him. My guest today is Mark Titus. Brother, I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for making the time and for being willing to share your story.
Thanks for the invite. I'm happy to be here, Brian.
Mark, tell us where you're from and how you spend your time these days.
Well, I'm up here in the Pacific Northwest in the top left corner of the continental United States. I live in Seattle. My wife and I are steadily building a house on Whidbey Island north of here. So we're kind of in between things in that world. I spend my time, a lot of it, maybe most of it, in great devotion to wild salmon. Those who know me through Illuman will know I'm a salmon guy. I spent the better part of my career here making films about protecting wild salmon for future generations and building a business that sources wild Alaskan sockeye salmon to restaurants and customers around the country that then gives back 10% of its profits to the place that we source from, which is called Bristol Bay, Alaska. It's the last fully intact wild salmon system on Earth. And we give money for indigenous young people to receive college scholarships and trade school scholarships. In essence, returning resources to the land instead of just extracting from the land. And that's all. The filmmaking and the business is all part and parcel to each other.
Now let's dive in and talk about the Men's Rites of Passage. The MROP is a unique experience. It's not a retreat or a workshop. It's an initiation. Many men arrive at the rites at a crossroads in their lives, looking for something they can't quite name. Before we dive into the why and the how, let's start at the very beginning. Mark, when and where did you make your rites?
I made my rites in Deroche, British Columbia in May of 2024.
And do you recall who the weaver was and about how many men were there?
Yeah, my weaver at that rites was Ned Abenroth, and I'm guessing there were 70 men there in attendance for the rites.
Now, when you think back to that weekend, what's the very first image that comes forth for you?
Wow, so many evocative images over that time, but the first image is here in the Pacific Northwest. We have a lot of attention to physical manifestations of prayer and release, and the vision for my rites, we had a space inside of an old barn that we called the Nest. And it was the first place that I landed after my bags were taken away and hustled off to my room, and sort of in this just surprise and amazement. And I was offered an invitation to ground myself in this beautiful space that had this beautiful contemplative music playing and incense and some sage burning and prayer flags, written prayers of all the men who had been there, had been to rites before. You could read them on strings around you, around your head. And I remember very keenly, to answer your question specifically, the first image that I saw was an image of a man, a wild man, holding a golden boy, both naked. There was green cast to him, and I saw this image and I just wept. I burst into tears. I knew I'd arrived. I knew there was something very mystical and true and necessary about being in this place of beautiful masculine energy, which has unfortunately been a rare occurrence in modern America. So that was the first image, was this beautiful piece of art on the wall.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, just going a little bit deeper here, how would you characterize the entire weekend experience for yourself?
The MROP for me, characterizing it in a holistic way, was a, God, I don't know another word, but mystical pause of time crossing a threshold. I felt like somehow I could comfortably let go of the busy mind that I brought in there and be present with these other men and myself and my creator, in a way that I certainly had anticipated something, but I didn't know what. And I knew immediately that there was something very special and very sacred happening here. And also something where I could let go of the armor that I brought with me and just let it fall apart, let it fall back by the car where the car was parked. And so I think that the characterization of the whole experience for me was just a warm embrace into mystery that I certainly had never been through before. I've never been to before, but felt exactly right. And exactly like, though I was being challenged, it felt like coming home.
Now, without sharing anything that you might consider private or confidential, was there an experience that you had at the Rites, or maybe even an encounter, conversation with another man that really stands out to you?
Oh, so many things stood out to me about the Rites. It's hard to know which to choose, honestly. And I'm not sure exactly how much to divulge, because I'm not sure if our audience is.
Yeah, whatever you're comfortable sharing is usually fine. It's not about divulging all the rituals and things. We do advise, obviously, that men come to the Rites with a little bit more of an open mind and maybe not have tried to find all the answers about what they're going to experience. But a lot of men have read Adam's Return, maybe have some ideas or talk to other men. So whatever you feel comfortable, Mark.
Well, I knew and had prepared my mind for an entrance into dying before I die and considering my own death. And perhaps I'll speak a little bit more about the why and the how I arrived there later. But for now, the very first ritual of death and understanding that there is a way through this consideration of our mortality and dying before we die, it truly broke me open. It broke me open in a way that I absolutely didn't expect. Couldn't have planned or scripted for. It broke my heart wide open and allowed me to be in a state of presence that I hadn't really experienced. Maybe one other time, that was a recent memory with the death of my father. But being in the here and now with the first ritual, experiencing my own death, was unique. It was novel. It was utterly transformational. And things just, with the great yes that was, because I certainly had some anxiety, some low level, maybe even mid level anxiety physically walking into that. But once through it, it was this empowerment that is very hard to articulate, but it was this empowerment nonetheless of I've faced this death, and there is only more and further to go in and deeper to descend.
Now, thinking back to your decision to attend the Rites, what were the circumstances in your life? What was going on for you that led you to participate in this event?
It's a great question, Brian. So my story about finding the Rites came after the death of my father in October. He died October 16th, 2023, my dad, Gil. And we had like many men, most men maybe, we had a challenging relationship. We had a loving relationship, especially in the end, and one that I, as a man in recovery from addiction, as an alcoholic, had the great privilege of making a real amends with my dad before he died. In my case, years before he died. thankfully. But also I had the most singular, spiritually profound experience of my life holding him while he passed through the veil into the other side. And flash forward some months later, a couple months later, it was holidays, and we decided as a family to not celebrate Christmas at the family home. It was too painful. And so we went out here in Washington, out to the coast, the ocean, and rented a house. And the whole family showed up, which was great. It was good. It was a collective place to grieve. But at a certain point, I needed to grieve on my own. And so I jumped in the car, and I'm a fly fisherman, a steelhead fisherman. And I decided to drive a couple hours to drive up the coast to steelhead fish for the day, get away from the throngs of family time. And I thought, I really need to listen to something for my journey as an audiobook. And so I started flipping through my audiobooks, and up pops The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. And I remember reading this book years prior. I remember it being good, but not much more. And thought it just, something about it flashed. It was like, this is it. This is what I need right now. And I listened to it, and I had a 2-hour drive up, and I stood in a river in the rain and the cold and the beauty, the austere beauty of the mountains and the mist and the fog. And then I listened to it for another 2 hours on the way home and back to our cabin, and something about it coming through my ears went and landed right in my heart, and it lit it on fire. And about a week later, I finished the audiobook after another little road trip, and I walked right from my car upstairs to where I'm sitting right now, and I opened my laptop and I looked up Richard Rohr, how can I get involved? And found the Center for Action and Contemplation in New Mexico. And then I thought, well, I'll volunteer and I'll go down there. And then I was, after a few minutes of thinking that's not really practical right now, dug deeper and found Illuman and the men's rites of passage. And it was an instant recognition. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. And so that night I filled out the application, and I prayed, and I hit send. And so that was that. And as I then flash forward to my rites in May, that was in January, I come to realize as I'm pulling up into the property, the beautiful, beautiful property in the hills in the green valley of the Fraser River in British Columbia, I realized that as I'm pulling in there, I'm celebrating 7 years of continuous sobriety, days prior to this. And to the day, it's 7 months from when my dad died. And strangely enough, or not, as I get assigned to a cabin to sleep in, I'm assigned to cabin, you guessed it, cabin 7. So, and as it turns out at the very end of the MROP, there was another reason to ponder the number 7 that Ned gifted us and gifted me. So that's what was going on for me when I arrived.
When you told your family members, your friends, your wife, maybe even a spiritual director, whoever, that you were going to attend the rites, what was their reaction?
I'm blessed to be in a marriage with a woman I love and I really like. And I really have learned over time and grown as a man in recovery to embrace rigorous honesty. And as such, I have found great strength and courage in sharing the things that are important to me. I don't share every last detail like anybody else, and certainly not things that are, hurtful or harmful or things that are ill-advised, but I do now share the things that are most important to me because she's the most important person in my life. And so when she saw the grief that I was going through, grieving my father, and then saw what happened to me physically when I found the rites of passage, she's like, get gone, go, do this. It was a instant embrace. I mean, she could physically see off of me this ebullience and light, I guess, as she said, in anticipation of this threshold of belonging. And similarly, I have a spiritual advisor who is my therapist. She specializes in recovery and the spiritual approach to recovery that is in the 12 steps that I'm a member of. And similarly, she as well was like this, she knew Richard Rohr's work and she just couldn't be more enthusiastic about it. Other members of my family and others, I kept to myself for the most part, because this is something I was taking in a very sacred way, in a way that was not to be shared or posted about or trivialized in any way. I was taking it to heart, and that was important. So I primarily shared with my wife and my therapist, my spiritual advisor, and they were blessing me with winds of the journey to go forth with Godspeed.
And when you came to Rites, did you come alone or did you come with a group of men?
I came completely alone. Didn't know a single person.
So when you drove up to you said it was Camp Fraser?
It was a place called Deroche, British Columbia, and just above, on a hill above the Fraser River, Fraser River Valley.
Okay.
Yeah, in BC.
What was going on for you right as you pulled up to the Rites and you were preparing to enter?
Well, I remember pulling through a tunnel of trees, and there was a great big tent, which I would later learn is called the Sacred Space for us, off to my right, and came up to the top of the hill and was greeted by a brother named Ted. And Ted invited me to get out of the car and hand him over my car keys. And I thought, well, here we are. I had some, certainly butterflies, anxiety, but a resounding yes in me that was like, okay, much like 7 months prior, the resistance that I had to being with my dad while he was dying, because I was afraid of it, I came somehow, I didn't come to somehow something I believe through my higher power, my creator came through me that allowed me to say yes to going through it, not around it, not under it, not over it, as I've done many times in my life in other situations, but to say yes to going through. And that same grace, I guess, was leading me on as I got out of my car, surrendered my keys and my bags, and was invited to be there, which is a hard thing to do. And this monkey mind is going, 1,000 miles an hour all the time. So yeah, it was instantly recognizing nature and which I am most at home in, and feeling that sense of vitality and also mystery, and then that grace of something telling me to keep going.
When you arrived at the Rites, was there something that you were hoping to be initiated into?
When I arrived at the Rites, all I knew was I have been involved ever more increasingly in a spiritual path of living because of the gift of desperation I was given at the time, 7 years prior. It's now 9 years, when I'd hit rock bottom as an addict, an alcoholic. And the only way forward for me was admitting complete surrender and defeat, and literally physically going down all the way to the bottom, and accepting that the path forward for me was admitting that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity, and then turning my will and my life over to that power. As such, coming to the Rites felt like, number one, it felt like an extension of that belief and that mode of being, without a doubt, absolutely sure about that. And then secondly, though, it felt like the fulfillment of a promise, and a fulfillment of, I don't know, prophecy is too strong a word, but of a vision, a dream that I'd had in my early 20s. When I was in college, I read Iron John. In fact, I met Robert Bly shortly after college. My best friend from college and I had Ragged Bone Shop of the Heart as well as Iron John, and we went to a reading with Robert Bly, and he signed a book for us. And I remember at the time, like, awakening to the idea that, as he wrote about in Iron John, that there are initiations that are sacred and that have been instigated from time immemorial for all men, in fact, all people throughout the world. And our culture here in the West is the only singular culture that has abandoned those things and hasn't had any meaningful ritual that brings men, young men, into the community of initiated men who have the tools and the open heart and the facing of their own death before they die, to move through life and truly live a life with meaning and purpose and love and gravitas and the commitment to service to others. And so I guess for me, yes, coming into the Rites, I felt there was a threshold to cross here, one that I had been subconsciously anticipating for almost 30 years.
Now, you've been very forthcoming about saying that you experience anxiety or maybe even some fear surrounding the decision to go to the rites. But as you arrived at the rites or went through the rites, can you elaborate on that anxiety, or was it a different kind of fear that may have emerged?
Hmm. I'm no stranger to anxiety. When I was in active addiction, I would live with a level 8 to 10 anxiety every single day. And I treated that with the very thing that was killing me, alcohol, which, spoiler alert, it makes it worse, much worse. And since getting sober and coming into recovery in a community of people who are committed to that in a spiritual way of living and being, I was given tools over time to deal with my anxiety and to incorporate my anxiety. In fact, not to pretend like it doesn't exist, but to in fact embrace it and see it and name it, breathe into it and let it go. So when I was leading up to the days before getting in the car to drive north across the border to go into Canada and go to the rites of passage, for me, I had anxiety. I had low level anxiety about what am I going to, just logistical things going across the border. And, but I mean, just all the usual kind of crap that, my brain will wade into and just gnaw on endlessly. But also just like, am I really prepared for this? Am I spiritually prepared for this? I didn't ever feel like there was an unworthiness. I felt like worthy and in line with my beloved, and yet I didn't know exactly if I could handle it or if I was up to the challenge. And so, as I remember, I took it real. I took it very seriously. Like I wasn't listening to K-pop on the way up. Not that I listen to K-pop, but I had some, some, as my nephews and nieces like to call it, Uncle Mark's dolphin music, some very sacred music, playing ambient music in the background. And I was in a state of prayer and communication about preparation and preparing and opening my heart no matter what to walk through whatever fear I may encounter, which I did beyond just arriving, like they're leading up to certain rituals, especially the ritual of death. Like I had definitely some anxiety around that and breathed into it, acknowledged what it was, thanked it for showing up and said, this is the path forward through this. So yeah, it was present. And because of it, I think it made the experience of passing through the threshold of initiation that much more sacred and that much more potent for me.
Taking you back now to when the rites closed. So, I always say it's a significant event. You're there for parts of 5 days, 4 nights. As you alluded to, there's ritual. There's a lot to do throughout that experience, and you go through a lot. But now the rites are over. You've had the closing rituals and it's time to leave, and you get in your car and you head back to Washington. How are you feeling right then?
Oh my God. The way I felt leaving Deroche was clear, at peace, and held in a certain embrace of love, being held gently in this embrace of love. I felt that I had passed through something that had only existed in my mind, a fear of death, and facing that and coming into a sense of intimacy, especially on my day on the land in the woods in a torrential rainstorm next to a creek, and visitations from the natural world and the other side, that felt like anyway. And it felt like my life before was before and my life now was integrated into this gentle embrace that I was held in, and it was not going to go away. Things were clear, and things in the outside world, traffic and noise and things which, are right there as soon as you leave, just weren't as consequential. And I didn't really care about them. To this day, 2 years later, I am still like, I don't really watch the news. I don't pay attention, don't care about it as much. Social media, been down 90%. Things that, I would let myself get wrapped around the axle about. It just, it's not like I don't notice them. I know they're there. I just don't care. I don't care as much about them. What I do care about is getting quiet in dissent, loving the people I get to love in this lifetime, and being of service if I can. So upon leaving, it was this deep quiet, and one of knowing and one of being held.
Your previous answer kind of anticipated my next question, but I want to still ask you to go a little deeper with the idea of, now that it's been 2 years since your rites, what's changed, in you practically, relationally, and spiritually?
Everything's changed, and nothing's changed because it was there all along. And the rites allowed me to understand that, and not just in a cerebral way in my mind, but in my body, in a cellular level, in my heart. As I mentioned, I just haven't been as interested in the noise in the secular world, for one, because as a man in recovery and one that has chosen a spiritual path in life of contemplation, it just doesn't matter to me as much. But two, I just can't get wrapped around the axle of those things because, we live in a really hard, challenging, divisive time in the United States of America right now. And I simply can't go to a place of being baited to be angry and of being reactive, and to looking at my neighbors and my friends and my people around me in my community and outside of my community as other. That is just not in the cards for me. I am called to look at every human, no matter what their actions or reactions are, as kin, and to find them in the embrace of love, and to find the gaze of Christ in their eyes. And I mean that in the universal cosmic Christ way, as Father Rohr would talk about it in his book. So, at the head of this, Brian, off camera, so to speak, I told you I'm in a liminal space right now in my life. I'm at a crossroads in my career, one that I have little tiny modicum of control over, but right now, this minute, very little, very little control. The things that have been done, and there's decisions going to be made that are outside of my control about the way forward with a vision that I had 8 years ago for creating a sustainable business to try to help people and help salmon and rivers and indigenous people. And it felt really good at the time. It felt like this was the calling and being led there. And there are circumstances now that suggest that it may or may not. And there may be there's room to accept the fact that things fall apart, and something may die here and something new may come around. And I got to be honest with you, 9 years ago, when I was still in active addiction, and before I had embraced a contemplative way of life in a community of other men who get it and want to get it and want to lean in and want to embrace each other in a loving embrace, I'd have been lost and isolated in the bathroom with a bottle under the sink. And no exaggeration. Like that was my life. And that could be my life again if I were to get off of this narrow path of embracing a pathway of love and descent into my body, into the earth itself that I'm made of. And I get to borrow this body for a while, just a little bit from. So in summary, everything has changed since the rites. I'm now very involved in Illumin community here in the Pacific Northwest. I've stoked in Oklahoma last year. I'll be stoking in Texas at John Knox Ranch this year, part of the initiator program a year ago in Oregon. And as I mentioned earlier, for me, I found community and love and support and a common language in this community of men through Illumin. Some of us, they find it in their churches, they find it in their secular communities, they find it in other works and parts of their life. For me, being a part in the Brotherhood of Illumin has complemented those things in my life, and I'll continue on with that path.
I'm really interested in how the rites impacts our relationships, especially our personal relationships. I mean, that's been a big factor for me. So let me ask you, if I was to say to your wife, How has Mark changed since making the Rites? Do you have any idea what she might say?
My wife's name is Venka, and I think if you were to ask her how I've changed since the Rites, she'd just start laughing, like a joyful laugh. Uh, I remember coming home, and maybe it was the day after I got home, or days, doesn't matter. We walked up the hill here in Queen Anne in Seattle to one of our coffee shops, and we like to go to, and I was just so aware of it's about this time of year. Everything was in bloom. Everything was so green and lush, and the wind was moving through the trees. And I was just so aware of all of it. Uh, for anybody that's seen the film Train Dreams, and Bill Macy's character, in a very memorable, maybe the most memorable scene in the movie, is looking around under this canopy of trees and the lights shining through, and he's with his friend who's the main character in the film, and he just says, "It's so beautiful." And his friend says, "What is?" And he's just looking around, and you can see he's seeing the same trees, he's seeing the same light, but he's also seeing through that into some truth beyond that and inside of that. And he says, all of it is so beautiful. And on that day, when I came home from the Rites and we were walking up the hill and noticing all the wind in the trees and the blooms and being present in that moment, that is exactly what I was feeling. And I remember my wife looking at me, and she just said, "I don't know what happened to you, but this is good." So I think her answer would be, I don't fully understand what it is, but I know that it is good.
Wonderful. Now let's see if we can pull back just a little bit. I want to ask you, since going on the Rites of Passage, have your thoughts about masculinity, even the Rites of Passage, even the male journey through life changed?
My understanding of the necessary balance between the divine masculine and the divine feminine has altered in ways that I didn't think were possible, and continues to grow. We are in such a ego-led state in daily life in the United States of America right now. And there are forces at work that seek to profit from rage and outrage and anger and darkness, and not contemplative darkness, but shadow. And I think there, over time, there has been an equation of men writ large being lumped into a fractal of that darkness that is associated with domination and fear and greed and power at all cost. And unfortunately, I think that there is a segment of our population that believes that that is what masculinity is about. And that's all masculinity has been about for the last 2,000 years, has been around domination and exploitation and greed and self-servitude. And that's something that I was utterly reactive to before doing the Rites, in all ways, like reactive in rejecting that and finding that in my own shadow work as well. Like, how is that showing up in me as well? And also reactive in certain segments of the population, just lumping all men into that category and saying that this is the masculine experience, to be dominant and exploitative and violent and oppressive. I have never experienced the embrace of wholehearted, open masculinity that is utterly prevalent in Illumin and through the Rites of Passage. And I mean that in a physical sense and in a intellectual sense and in a heart sense. You are welcome in this circle. You are embraced in this circle. And surprise, surprise, it's okay to like physically embrace other men in this circle in a way that until finding this community has been viewed with suspicion or with something akin to rejection of male intimacy. And clearly this has nothing to do with sexuality. This is about finding a place that you can open your heart and let your armor down for what's in your life around other men who are seeking the same thing that you are, that I am, which is a way to move in and through this world that is in line with what my heart already knows about my love for my creator. And I find this place that I can express that in words, in ideas, and in physical embrace with other men. Like, holy shit, how did I not know about this before this? Which doesn't really matter. I came to Lumen and the Rites exactly when I was supposed to. And I believe others will as well.
Yeah, I want to affirm what you said about the Illumin community and its openness and welcomeness, and just you described it better than I could, but thank you so much for that. 12-step work is a catalyst in my own spiritual life. I started in Al-Anon more than 15 years ago now, and I really credit that with providing sort of a practical foundation for the spirituality in my life. And it really, without that, it would not have been possible, I don't think, for me to attend my own rites of passage. Therefore, because it's been such a big part of your own journey as well, and the more time I spend it in Illumin, I wouldn't hazard a guess, but a significant number of men that I encounter in Illumin have some background in 12-step work and some familiarity with that. And so I'd like you to perhaps make a case for a man who is involved with 12-step work for attending a rites of passage.
Well, I'm super happy to hear you're involved in 12-step work as well, Brian. I know that it's changed my life completely. I'm a wholehearted adopter. It's worked for me. It works showing up one day at a time. It works getting out of my head and into action. It ignited a spiritual journey for me that I didn't think was possible, honestly, in the institutional religious world that I had been brought up in, and I subsequently rejected at a certain point in my life when I was a young man, and came back to, I came back to a Jesuit brand of Catholicism later in life through a Buddhist, through Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, that's okay. That's cool to come back to your roots. It's all, this finger's all pointing to the same moon. But 12-step work is famously, at least in my experience, known for people coming in and going, man, it's all good except for the God thing. And how many sponsees I've had that have, said those words. I had a little bit of feeling about that, not much, as I was all in. I had the gift of desperation. But there is this in 12-step world for those people who are active in their sobriety, who are active in recovery, who are active in service, who you can see a light coming from. Because of that commitment to a spiritual way of being, there is a commitment. We are bought in by this one step, one day at a time philosophy. I don't have to have all the answers for the rest of my life. I don't have to have all the mysteries of the universe here. All I have to do is not drink today, clean house, and trust God. And those things are manageable today. I can do that. Even an addict like me can do that. And I think that Illumin is an accelerator. I've spoken with other brothers who are also in recovery. We have a weekly recovery meeting, actually every Wednesday night online. Guys from all over the country show up to this. And we've talked about it being our Illumin recovery meeting being almost like a master's course on recovery. It's like the next step. It's the next evolution in the already established spiritual journey that the 12 steps lay out. And I will add here that I have friends that are 12-step curious and Illumin curious that have had some reservations about the God thing and about, in their minds, the rigidity of being involved in communities. They've been burnt by institutional religion and other things that have made them feel a sense of holding back because they just don't want to get looped into something that's going to make them feel like they're in a cult and that they're being told what to do and they're getting fed, the Kool-Aid. And and they're going to get summarily dumped and left for dead, which is understandable. That's happened to many, many, many people. And I've certainly experienced that in my life as well. What I will say is in both cases with the 12-step program and with Illumin, it cannot be, and it is throughout the process. If you go to the rites of passage, at least with the Weaver with Ned, it was mentioned time and time again that there are no bars in the windows here. There is no blood oath. There is no tithing. There is no centralized government that you are beholden to, where a mad dictator is going to assume control and take control of your life and secretly spy on what you're doing. None of that exists at all. It is entirely voluntary to show up or not on your own schedule, as you will. If you choose to support either of the communities financially, you can. You're never badgered about it. That possibility is there if that feels good and right for you. And only in ways that you are available and means that are available to you at the moment. I mean, and I'll just, as a side note, tell you, the deciding moment for me going to MROP was about finance, truly, because I went through, despite being completely, my heart on fire and going, I got to do this. It got to the page in the application where it's like, well, now it's time to pay. And I'm like, aha, here we go. Here's the $20,000 woo-woo gotcha. Be part of this whole experience package and get all the things, and click on the thing. And it was, in our case, it was $650 for 5 nights, 4 days, everything covered. And P.S., if you can't afford that, it will be provided for you by other brothers. And I was like, this is real. So in all those cases, I have found a overwhelming embrace of men that are in 12-step world, in recovery, that non-12-step world, and people that are, as we like to say in the business, normies, who drink normally and, don't have substance abuse disorder. Complete embrace. You are welcome here. You are beloved. You are a part of this song and a part of this journey. And even more so, having that depth of going into that hard, dark place that certainly I had to go to find my rock bottom. There's a common language and there is a common hope.
Thank you. The last thing, the final, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I just have one more question. And you had mentioned earlier, years ago, having read Iron John and encountering Robert Bly. I, believe it or not, I just read Iron John within the last few months and, become more and more curious about Bly. To be honest with you, he was somebody I found kind of intimidating from some of the interviews I saw, especially that Bill Moyers interview that he did back in the late 80s, early 90s on PBS. He kind of has a real firm, harsh voice, reminds me of my own inner critic. But that aside, I just wondered if you could reflect a little bit more on because Bly is so important in the men's work and in the mythopoetic men's work, can you reflect a little bit more on your own encounter with Bly and how he's impacted your journey?
Yeah, Robert Bly also lit a fire in me as a young man. And I'm going to say 20 years old, probably. Reading Iron John, identifying not in a cerebral nuts and bolts kind of way with all of the beats in the myth of Iron John that he lays out and then expounds upon in the titular book, Iron John, because that's, as we know, as we start doing this work, that's not what myths are for. Myths are not designed to make critical sense each step of the way. A plus B does not necessarily equal C. It is about a deeper journey and speaking on a soul level. And while my brain wants to make sense of everything, and that's just normal, all of our brains do that. Of course, I couldn't make complete sense of what is exactly happening with the golden ball and the guy coming out of the pond. And my brain wants to make sense of it, capture it, hold it, so it's not a threat, right? And at some place in there was some buy-in to surrender to it and say, okay, I don't understand all this, but on a cerebral sense, but I do feel like it is speaking to something inside me that I need to follow. And the message inside of Iron John about the absolutely critical, necessary, transformational rites of passage that all other men have gone through in human history that we heretofore have not really had available here in the United States or other parts of the West. That was like, I need that. And I looked for that, and I tried to create my own ritual and ceremony, and I literally did and physically did in other parts of my life. But it wasn't the same because it wasn't in community, and it wasn't being gifted from elders who had been through it, So the result of reading Iron John left me with a longing that I didn't quite fully understand in my mind, but I knew was happening in my heart. And then subsequent to that, picking up the book, The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart, which is an anthology of poetry that Bly and Michael Mead and others are editors for and offer commentary on. It's about work for men and poems for men. And that just really further lit the fire even higher for me. In fact, that book, as I mentioned, my best friend from college, Terry, and I we had one copy, and we had it signed at a live reading with Robert Bly that we got to meet him in person. And over time, in various periods of our life, as we have gone through different seasons, that book has been shipped across country. So currently Terry has it. He's in a season right now where he needs it, and I may be needing it soon here too. So that's been a real joy to have those words from poets across breadth and time that Robert Bly made sense of on a heart level for me. So I'm in debt to the man, and I appreciate him, and I also was kind of intimidated by him a bit, and to understand fully the depth of what he was talking about. But as I mentioned earlier, once I kind of let go of that and tried to just say yes to it, not understanding it all, it brought me a sense of longing that led me to the MROP.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. I feel a great deal of affection for you and your story, and really appreciate you being vulnerable and even making space this morning. I know you've had an intense day already, and I just wish you well with the future endeavors with your work. And I look forward to moving in further into community with you, and maybe catching up with you at Awaken or one of these rites of passage at some point. So thank you, brother.
Likewise, brother. It's been an honor. I'm so grateful to get the chance to get to meet you and know you a little bit.
For those listening who are now feeling a tug in their own soul and are curious to learn more, allow me to share a bit about the history of these rites. The men's rites of passage was originally developed by Father Richard Rohr and was first offered at Ghost Ranch, New Mexico in 1996. While it was supported for many years by the Center for Action and Contemplation, since 2012, Illuman has been the steward of this work, preserving and adapting the rites for men all over the world. To learn more about the history and the theology behind this work, I highly recommend reading Adam's Return by Richard Rohr. If you are ready to make your rites, there are 4 opportunities in the United States and another in the United Kingdom in 2026. The first is in Northern California, May 13th through the 17th. The second in the United Kingdom, July 22nd through the 26th. And in Illinois, August 12th through the 16th. There's one on the East Coast in New Jersey, September 16th through the 20th. And the final one of the year is in Texas, which is in MROP and Umbrales, our Spanish language rites, September 30th through October 4th. You can find details and registration information at illumin.org/MROP or illumin.org/events. Additionally, mark your calendars for Awaken, the annual national gathering of Illumin, taking place November 5th through the 8th in New Mexico. You can find more at illumin.org/awaken. Finally, a special thank you to our sponsor, Choosing Presence. If today's conversation moved you, I encourage you to bring more intentionality into your daily life. Download the Practicing Presence app for free at choosingpresence.org/app. It's a simple but profound way to stay connected to the journey we've discussed today. Thank you for listening to Follow Me to the MROP. Until next time, brothers, stay present.